All right, Stochastic, here we go. It's your old pal Emac coming to you on a Sunday evening here with the one and only Greg Ehrenberg as we get ready for Sunday Night Football. One heck of an afternoon slate there. Sun shining on me. It's shining on the Seahawk. My light makes me look like I'm an angel. Here we go. We're going to have some fun. So first thoughts, Phillip Rivers, I thought he was going to get hit a couple times and retire after the first quarter. That son of a gun actually looked okay. And it looked like he was wearing 3 flak jackets, but says the old fat guy talking about this from Florida. But where was the Seahawk rush? Why don't the Seahawks pass? They're almost like Josh Allen and the Bills.
Your team won, Emac. Your team won.
I know, but they need to put themselves in a position to climb out of a massive hole, just like Josh Allen and the Bills every week. Did you think he was going to win this week? I didn't.
No, but hey, your Seahawks ended up winning, so you can't be too aggrieved about that. If Jason Myers would have missed the kick, then yeah, more so. But all's well that it does end up ending well. And yeah, as far as Rivers, the arm strength, if Phillip Rivers had to just stand at the middle of the field and throw the ball as far as he possibly could, how long does it go? 20 yards, maybe?
Yeah. He was hitting like they call it like the splash zone or the green zone, like just over where the linebackers are. That was about all the farther it was going. I was only watching on Red Zone, so I only saw the more successful plays. But yeah, I was texting my buddies because we were all texting last night with the Huskies dog walking their opponents, literally. All right, but a bit of euphoria there. I messaged Greg saying I need a moment. I'm mourning the Seahawks because I thought they were losing. So I turned everything off. And he's like, they're still alive. And I turned it on just in time to see that they were up 18-16. So there we are. All right. What do we got going on tonight? Well, we have a terrible defense, but it's good for fantasy purposes in the Dallas Cowboys. We've got Minnesota with their, I don't want to call this his sophomore year because he never played, right? So he's still a rookie. So with rookie J.J. McCarthy on the other side, we've got some old decrepit running backs. This time it's not it's not Miles Sanders. He hasn't played since week 4. He's completely out of the picture. But Aaron Jones is here. We had CeeDee Lamb get a concussion last week early in the third quarter, or like a third of the way through the third quarter. So he left the game. Apparently George Pickens didn't really want to play, wanted to cost himself a couple million or a year on his next contract as he heads into the offseason. Ryan Flournoy popped up. Oh my God, is it a changing of the guard? No, because he's essentially playing the slot routes that Lamb doesn't get. So his best games all come without CeeDee Lamb. So we've come back full circle. Everybody's healthy in this one. Hopefully the 10 days since they played the Thursday game, the 10 days for Pickens has helped him get his head right, I guess. But we know all about crazy wide receivers, and especially crazy wide receivers in Dallas. They've had more than their share of them. So we've got narratives that we can invent here. We have some mispriced players, I think, on DraftKings. We got a lot to unpack here. DraftKings even has a couple of $200 ballers and a $400 baller if you want to punt. So lineup construction is going to be all over the place. Are you ready to buckle up?
Yeah, you didn't even talk about my my favorite narrative. Well, I shouldn't say favorite narrative, but I'd say one of the craziest coincidences of the entire day, Emac, which the best story was the Phillip Rivers one, but the parallels between Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, through 8 seasons, they've won the exact same amount of Super Bowls. And then on top of it as well, in the 9th season for each, Brady and Mahomes, they missed the playoff for the first times in each of their careers. And both of them, it came as a result of a torn ACL. Tom Brady tore his ACL in his 9th career season. Patrick Mahomes today tore his ACL in his 9th career season. So one of the odder parallels I could remember about players who are, constantly compared to each other.
That I was not aware of all of those. I did see what I thought it was an ACL, and people are like, oh, he's walking it off. It's not that problem. It's like a lot of people walk with the ACL or the MCL or the PCL, right? Unless the knee is completely shredded, they kind of walk, probably because they're so amped on adrenaline. But you couldn't hear it, but you could kind of feel that, oh, that's like that popped. And that's the thing when he was holding the back area of his knee. Now, I'm not a doctor, but it's like, that we've seen this movie before.
Yeah. Well, you're as qualified as many of the fantasy Twitter doctors online, if that means anything.
Let's not start with that. But I will say, everybody, you need to follow me at Emac DFS, because I was getting asked here because we've been reworking the site here at Stochastic. We had a little obstacle we needed to overcome, but it allowed us to smooth out 7 years of just cobbling things together and getting this all slick and ready in our data hub now. But we don't have our articles up yet. So follow me on Twitter at EmacDFS. I will be posting my articles over on OddsShopper, but it'll be easier to find them since that's not really where we present articles. It's easier to find them if you follow me. And I'll drop the link here in just a second to the NFL article, but you'll get my NBA articles there. And then I'm going to start putting more snippets onto Tails. Since Tails is sponsoring this show or presenting the show. We are Tails, so hey, there we go. All right, the euphoria is not wearing off, so let's just get right into this here. So let's talk about the Justin Jefferson. So coming off two of the literal two worst games of his career. So through 90 games coming into this season, he was leading the league, the all-time league leader for receiving yards per game at 91.6, or probably 96.5. That's dropped from his 90 games that he had. That's already dropped down to 91.6. That's how poor of a season it's been. And it's not his fault. We can directly point this to J.J. McCarthy. For whatever reason, he keeps throwing rockets to him. And for whatever reason, Addison gets the better lob ball.
I can tell you what the reason is. Emac. He's bad. That's the reason.
Yeah, but he beat my Huskies in the national championship. So whatever. But we have a very big price discrepancy here. We've got Justin Jefferson at 8,800 on DraftKings, and he's 11,400 on FanDuel. So you're seeing a significant change in the projected popularity there. And that's partly because, the last two games, they've literally been dreadful. Now, whoever the terrible, horrible other backup played one of those games, but that is causing Jefferson to suppress. In fact, Jefferson has only 15 more yards over the last two games than Greg and I do combined. That's how mad it's been. So there's our thing. What's happening with Justin Jefferson, and should he go into meltdown mode, much like George Pickens?
So depending how the season finishes, I think that there's a very, very likely scenario that Justin Jefferson asks for a trade in the offseason and just says, I'm not going through another season with J.J. McCarthy as my quarterback. But we'll see. We'll see how the season ends up finishing. If there is a spot for the Vikings offense and Justin Jefferson get back on track, this Cowboys defense, well, it has been better since the trade deadline when they got Quinn and Williams and whatnot. This is still not like a preeminent defense or anything like that. Although, with it looking like Micah Parsons tore his ACL today, all of a sudden the trade of Micah Parsons looks pretty rosy in hindsight for the Dallas Cowboys. But all that aside, if you do look at the passing game for the Vikings today, this should be a spot where they have potential to get back on track relative to how they've played in some of these recent games. And I don't think that J.J. McCarthy is completely without talent. It's just more so he's essentially a rookie this season. He's coming off a knee injury of his own where he didn't play at all last year. And the expectations were just incredibly high for him coming into this year. And they were, in my opinion, way too high for a quarterback who's in his first season. And jokes aside, there have been times, or at least from a fantasy standpoint, he's looked okay this season. He has a little bit of rushing upside. He did have 3 touchdown passes last week. So at least for this game, I don't want to make it seem like I'm completely off of the Vikings or anything like that. I prefer the Cowboys receivers to Justin Jefferson, but I mean the passing game of Minnesota is certainly playable in this game.
Yeah, and it feels dicey, but it's offset by the price. Now, FanDuel, different story with half PPR, the price for not quite Justin Jefferson, but not for the abomination that we've seen over the last 2 games. The other thing we want to remember is that if we stretch back 5 games, and I put all this in my article, if we stretch back 5 games, which I think is appropriate, Jefferson has 40 targets in the last 5 games. Okay, that's pretty good. overall, and 4 of the 5 were with McCarthy. Addison has 30, Aaron Jones has 19, Hawkinson has 18, Naylor, he has 15, but he only has a couple over each over the last couple games. That he sort of has he caught lightning in a bottle a couple times on those long touchdowns and just really hasn't been heard from since. But there's just not that much passing volume that's coming here from McCarthy because clearly they're trying to protect him or protect the team. Now, both these teams need to win out to even have a hope of making the playoffs. If Minnesota loses, I believe they're mathematically eliminated. Dallas, there's some convoluted thing that I can't remember what happened and how the Philadelphia win today impacts it. But basically, if Dallas wins out, they have at the start of today, they had a 10% chance of making the playoffs. And their best route was somehow catching Philly. And because there's so many other wild card teams, I mean, the NFC West is going to have 2 wild card teams almost assuredly. So it's a tricky path for both teams, though technically in this game they're still alive. The other thing that's tricky to find out is after Kansas City lost last week, the articles were either saying they're still alive or they're eliminated. And it's like, you guys realize a lot of the models you're looking at don't update. But then I was trying to math into it and be like, wait, are they actually eliminated? It turned out they weren't. Now they are today. But they had a snowball's chance in hell. But both these teams are going to continue trying. It's not like either team is going to pack it in. Jerry Jones rarely lets his teams do that, even when he's running out backup quarterbacks. And then Minnesota, you just got to keep running McCarthy out there. I hope he figures it out. So,
and I should also mention the Cowboys are very, very live to make the playoffs.
But it's only a 10% chance.
Yeah, but either way, it's still a situation where if an NFL team, by the way, we just got a confirmation that the Packers think that Micah Parsons tore his ACL, but for a 10% chance to make a playoffs, like teams are never going to roll over in that scenario. They're always going to play to win when they have a 10% chance. Because the other thing too that those odds are taking into account is the likelihood of teams winning their games. But in the Cowboys' opinion, I'm sure they're looking at it as we can win all of our remaining games. They're not really looking at just the statistical angle of it. And if they were to win all of their games, I would have to plug this in. It's actually, if you ever use the Athletic, they have a pretty cool playoff simulator where you could see, like, if you put in, like, what happens if the Cowboys win out the rest of their games, their odds of winning. I'm sure if they won out, their odds of winning are probably over 50%. But
it probably gets better. You're right.
Yeah. So, like, I don't think the Cowboys, which is to what you were saying, like, I don't think the Cowboys are going to be, rolling over or anything like that. We could see the Vikings start to sit guys, not this week, but maybe in a couple of weeks, depending how these upcoming games go. Like, maybe Justin Jefferson is another shitty game and it causes issues in the locker room. And he says, I don't want to be here next year. Then maybe they end up sitting Justin Jefferson or something like that. But none of that should impact today's game at the very least.
No, but that's a good point. And this is how Greg's mind works, where I'm the old dinosaur here that's just happy to be here. But see, Greg thinks about that. Now, I should have thought, win rates and win share and win percentage, that evolves with each step of the game, right? Just like when you're watching the real game and you see the win probability move up and down depending on what's happening. That's going to happen as things go. I default to old reading the newspaper for and trying to figure out playoff pictures and scenarios that way. So, old habits die hard. But these are the things you want to think about. Do you guys know if you follow Greg on Tails, everything is free over there that he is posting? And he gives futures bets. Well, some of those are going into the Lindy and Friends chat. But Greg is pumping out his bankroll builder that he did last year for NBA. That's over on Tails. There's over 200 contributors on Tails. Now, a lot of them are premium packages, but almost all of them are putting some good free plays in front because they want to entice you. They want to show you what they've got and get you to try what they're doing there. But over 200 contributors now, and that leads to several hundred free recommendations each day. Now, this is not like Dub Club. There's no screen what are you manipulating screenshots and things like that, because we keep tabs on everybody else and they're all tracked. So we're trying to get that garbage out and create a nice little safe space here at Tails. And then people get by on their merits. Some people will have down streaks, but we weren't going to let people fib about that because we'll bounce them if they do. But check that out. You can get a lot for free, and there's a lot more on premium.
I agree.
That was not a good segue. My bad. I painted myself into a corner.
All good. But yeah, you guys, the Tails app, like Emac said, it's free. Download it. There's a link down below in the YouTube description box, or if you just want to go to the browser, it's tails.bet. Super easy to find. And yeah, Emac's been writing some stuff up there as of late as well.
All right. And then one last favor, and then I won't mention that again. I'm going to drop my link. If you guys want to retweet this, I would be forever grateful. I know a lot of you have hit it and liked it, but just so people know that these articles are still out and available. They're just in a different home. And if you follow me, you'll always get it because I post my articles every day. But I would appreciate that as we rebalance things here. All right. So we kind of hit on the passing game a little bit there. The 3 touchdowns that McCarthy had last week, all 3 went to tight ends. 2 targets, 2 catches, 24 yards, 2 touchdowns for Oliver. That was not expected. And then Hawkinson had a couple targets, and then he caught the 3rd touchdown. So we have seen those guys, I believe they have combined for 7 of the 15 or so touchdowns for the team this year. Now, that shouldn't be overly surprising. Now, again, McCarthy has only played in 7 games, but you had Wentz there and the other backup. Tight ends tend to be the closest guy that these younger and these inexperienced quarterbacks are going to see, and it's kind of their security blanket. So that is something that we want to keep in mind because they are at a variety of favorable salary points tonight on both sides, DraftKings and FanDuel. And we hit a little bit on Addison. He's okay. Naylor, not really exciting. And then the running backs. I mean, Aaron Jones, he's the lead back, but he can barely get over 50% snap share because he's always dinged up or hurt. So they're letting Jordan Mason do a lot of the work between the 20s. Now, he only has a couple targets over the last 7 games, but he's averaging around 40 yards per game. And he's got, I think he has 2 touchdowns in the last 4. Jones was hurt in the middle of the season. In that time frame when Mason had all of the work, he actually looked pretty good. Didn't get much in the passing, but he had 3 or 4 touchdowns in that stretch and a couple really good games. But it's all coming via the run. And then Jones, surprisingly, has 1 rushing touchdown and 1 receiving touchdown. So Father Time is undefeated, and having a wet behind the ears quarterback under center is not helping him out. But that kind of wraps up your whole Minnesota offense here. So a lot of people in play because, again, Dallas allowing top 3 most fantasy points to wide receivers and quarterbacks, tied for first with most touchdowns allowed, second in most yards allowed. They have the ability to prop this up. They are, as Greg mentioned, since that trade, they've been getting better with their pressure and their pass rush. They actually get decent sack numbers, but they're still giving up a ton of yards in these games. So that's why we're still semi-excited. Now, we did see, I think it was a super chat right here, so we'll use this kind of as the transition. But Jordan Kenworthy is asking, would you go with a 3-3 stack, or are you going to lean more 4-2, 5-1 Cowboys? I would like to get maybe 20%. We'll see what happens when I run this in. 20% of 3-3 or Vikings heavy, just because of the way this defense is for Dallas. Now, a lot of that's going to be predicated on what can McCarthy do, but McCarthy does have at least a little bit of a rushing floor because he's running for his life, but that's helpful for fantasy purposes. So I think that when you start to see the 4-2s and the 5-1s become really popular, I think it's okay to kind of get into that 3-3 range. 5-1 Minnesota, 4-2 Minnesota. Who do you want to play? There's just too many. There's way better skill position players across the board at every position on the Cowboys. So it makes it a little tough to go more than 3-3.
So I don't typically put a ton of thought into the lineup type builds, 3-3, 4-2, or anything like that, especially because every slate is very unique and different. The pricing is different. The matchups are different. So a lot of times people will look at historical results from Showdown and be like, you got to play 4-2 because that's won X amount of slates this year, or you got to play this position in the captain spot, or you got to roster somebody who's this salary. A lot of it's just kind of randomness based on insignificant sample sizes, though. So I look at all of the slates as being individual ones that aren't really related to previous slates. But one thing that is notable here, 3-3 is absolutely a live lineup. So just for reference, if you look here in the Sims, of the lineups I built out here, of the top 9 lineups, 4 of them are 3-3. So amongst the top lineups, it's actually the most used roster type by the Sims of the top end Sim ROI lineups.
Indeed. And that's a good, we learn more and more about Showdown. It's because there's the smaller player pool and there's the 3 primetime slates. It's got more trends to study. But we've all evolved as players over the years, right? Remember, just getting to the correlation phase took about a year and a half. Then it was, well, you don't want to play both running backs together. You don't want to do this. If you've got someone in the captain spot that's a pass catcher, you always want to have their quarterback, etc. And we've learned that's not the case because the Sims across the whole industry have started to show us that we didn't know what was out there because we had no way to study it. But the Sims is allowing us to understand it. And I do like to rein it back in because that's my way of finding differentiation. And the Sims are showing us, here are the lineups you should choose if you want to go 3-3, right? It's not like I'm inventing them. I can go find them and say, okay, that's about what I would like to see. And then
Emac's so old, he actually invented the 3-3 lineup construction. Before him, it didn't exist.
Yes.
People only played 4-2s before Emac. Yeah.
All right. Well, I do remember, this is going way back. I believe the first Showdown slate was for the Patriots Super Bowl, and it involved IDP. It involved individual defensive players.
So if I remember correctly, it didn't start at the Super Bowl. It started in the playoffs leading up to the Super Bowl. I think they started it in the AFC and the NFC championship games. I think about this actually all the time because it's one of the worst beats I've ever seen for DFS. Is there was a guy after the slate ended was solo winning the Millie Maker for the Showdown contest in the Super Bowl, and then he got stat corrected out of it because of a
tackle or something reassigned.
It was a pass deflection that got taken away from a defensive back, and as a result, he went from solo winning first to a giant train ended up winning it, and he came in like 132nd place or something like that, which, you know, you guys knowing how top heavy the Showdown contests are, he went from winning $1 million solo like $80 or something like that. And it was because of a deflected stat correction, a pass deflection stat correction that happened maybe like 45 minutes after the game ended. It's like I'm sure he thought he won for a very long time before he didn't win.
Yeah, that's why if I ever luck into $1 million, I'm not going to tell my wife till the next day. It's just no, I don't want to have to unwind that. She wouldn't understand it if it lost. So, all right, turning our attention to Dallas here, we have Minnesota has one of the highest pressure rates, one of the highest blitz rates. So they are coming at quarterbacks constantly. Now, Dallas has had some issues on their offensive line, but we get a veteran quarterback here in Dak Prescott. And while he is not particularly mobile from a running perspective, he can move around in the pocket. And that's going to be something that's really key tonight because his best receivers, CD is good at everything, but they work better from the medium to deeper portion of the field. So it'll be the things I'm interested to see is the Dallas coaching staff tweak some hot routes because of this. And we want to know that Javonte Williams, while he has like 43 targets and 36 receptions or something like that, he's averaging 3.9 yards per reception. So not helpful on DraftKings, very helpful on, or not helpful on FanDuel, very helpful on DraftKings. But I'm curious to see what they're going to do with their short routes. Now they may just end up going to the tight ends, but outside of Ferguson, the other tight ends have like 3 and 4 targets each over the last 4 games. So that's Brevin Span, or Brevin Ford Span Ford, whatever his name is, and then Schoonmaker. So there's not really that short dump off guy. It's kind of Javonte, but it doesn't go anywhere. So that I'm kind of curious to see how they handle pressure. And then Javonte, I believe he's already at 1,000 yards this season, just over 1,022 or something like that. 9 rushing touchdowns, two receiving touchdowns. even though, again, he only has like 150 receiving yards on all those targets. But he, I think, is kind of interesting here. And obviously Lamb, Pickens, etc. I'm scared for Flournoy just because he seems to have his best games when Lamb is out or injured in game. And then he and Kavonte Turpin are probably each good for about 2 targets a game. They're going to be good for about a 30% snap share each. They're kind of splitting that wide receiver 3 role, but in different ways, because they'll put Turpin out there and try to make sure he gets at least 1 or 2 targets for sure and a touch, because it's so dynamic. And one of their playmakers, this is his 3rd year in the league, or 4th year in the league. He made all Pro Bowl his rookie year, and then as a return man, and then last year he also made the Pro Bowl, and I believe he was 1st or 2nd team all NFL. So he has that different role than Flournoy, but just from an available snap share, they kind of are splitting that 3rd wide receiver role. But that's a lot of guys that are in play here. How do you want to approach this? Because Minnesota really does have actually a good defense.
Yeah. So from the Cowboys side of the game, a couple things that I want to address that you had just said. First off, I think the most interesting talking point is the Cowboys pass catchers. So CeeDee Lamb last week, concussion, what looked like a really bad concussion at that point in time. The only reason he's playing this week, Emac, is because that was a Thursday night football game and they got the couple extra days off. If it was not for that, I think there's almost no chance that CeeDee Lamb is playing in this game. But he got the couple of extra days of recovery because it was a Thursday night football game. But what ends up happening in his absence is, like you mentioned, Flournoy ends up having a big game. In general, Flournoy is just not all that involved when Pickens and CeeDee Lamb are both there as 1-2s, which makes sense, right? These are guys who demand a lot of targets, and they're also both really good for the most part. Sometimes George Pickens just kind of checks out of games, which you mentioned earlier. We saw a little bit of last week. So Flournoy is somebody who I don't really have interest in. Let's see, is he showing up in the Sims? 8%, so like some lineups, but on the whole, he's not really showing up prominently. But then the decision point for a lot of people to make is going to be CeeDee Lamb versus George Pickens. I am pretty much always on the side of CeeDee Lamb at this point in the season now because the price points are so similar. George Pickens is $9,800 in the flex. CeeDee Lamb is $10,000 in the flex, and they have the same ownership. So this is what we're at now with these two guys, is each slate, Pickens and Lamb typically have comparable ownership, and they're comparably priced. And I just think Lamb is the better player of the two. It doesn't mean I think Pickens is terrible or anything like that. I just think CeeDee Lamb is really, really good, and he's one of the top 5 or so wide receivers in the NFL, and Pickens is maybe one of the top 15 to 20 or so wide receivers in the NFL when he has his, head screwed on right, which is not always the case. But for me, I prefer Lamb to Pickens, Emac. I don't know where you're at between the two.
No, I agree completely. I have nothing of substance to add to that. But it's funny that their salaries are still so close.
Yeah, you've got, like you said right here, Lamb, $10K, Pickens, $9,800. And same thing we saw on Thursday Night Football. And CeeDee Lamb was on pace for a massive, massive game in that spot as well. It was just but he still had a pretty good game. It was just the concussion is what held him back from having like a potentially nuclear game, because he only plays part of that game and has 6 catches for 121 yards, despite missing, like half the game with a concussion. So it is CeeDee Lamb for me over George Pickens. And hopefully there aren't any remnants of the concussion issue like we saw with T. Higgins last week.
Yeah, that we should just call it a bruised brain. We don't do it justice. We don't do it justice.
Yeah, a sprain.
All right.
Sprained brain. Sprain. He's got a brain sprain. It rhymes.
Anyway. All right. Well, speaking of sprained brains, Team Free Money got its ass kicked yet again. So I'm going to drop 10 more $1 head-to-heads in the DK lobby. On main slate, I won 2 of my 40 head-to-head games. So you guys are going to want to get in on this money. Sotex is funding his daughter's college tuition 80 cents at a time, courtesy of me. All right. I think that kind of hits most everything. There have been some good questions in chat here. Kickers. So we're looking at 2 of the best kickers in the game here. You've got Will Reichard, who was the kicker for Alabama. Let me get my notes. He has not mixed an extra point yet in his 2 seasons. He has a 92% success rate this year, and he is 8 for 10 from beyond 50. That's really, really good. For his career, he is about 90% from 50, beyond 50. Just nuts. Until you get to old man Brandon Aubrey. He had a winding path to get to the NFL. He's 30 years old, but this is his 3rd year. He has become the gold standard. So he, in his first 2 seasons, he was Pro Bowlers. He was first team All NFL his rookie year as the kicker, second team last year. For his career on all kicks, 90.4%. He is 86.7% on those from 50 plus, 33 of 38. Ridiculous. Last week, he became the first kicker in NFL history to connect on at least 3 kicks of 50 or more yards in the same game. No one has ever done that before. Yes, it helps that they are able to work with the kicker balls now and those various things, but we're seeing some phenomenal kickers, and we know that Jerry World is one of the better kicking environments here in the NFL. So I think you can play both those guys. Yes, kicker fish, whatever. Seth, I hope you're watching. But these guys are really, really good. Minnesota defense is good, but I think Dak can probably negate their pass rush a little bit, but they're probably live for 5 combined sacks and turnovers. Same thing about Dallas, but that's mostly because they're going after McCarthy, right? Rather than if they were going against a league average quarterback, we may not be quite as excited about them. So,
so I'm going to totally agree with you on the kickers. Kickers showing up in a good amount of lineups. They're also popular for this slate, but seems more or less warranted. We've got Brandon Aubrey showing up in about 30% of lineups in the Sims. We've got Will Reichert showing up in about 25% of lineups. If you guys are looking to save money with somebody in that mid 5K price range, these are the 2 that are showing up by far the most in our data. So we've got, let's see, who's behind them. So it was Aubrey in about 30% of lineups, Reichert in 25%. The next most rostered player in that price range is, Flournoy at 8% at $4,800. So in that mid-range, the kickers are clearly the guys to go to. And we've talked about this on these shows that you and I have done together, Emac. For whatever reason, these primetime games, it seems like the Cowboys will almost shoehorn in longer Brandon Aubrey field goals. They love to give him long field goal attempts in primetime games.
Yes. Allegedly. Someone was asking who won the Millie. Team named Giants and Dwarves. He had 236 points on DraftKings, 5 points ahead of Weatherman. Not Weatherman. Who is it? Weatherman 777. This is Weatherman 172. But literally fire at every position except Ben Sinnott.
Here was the lineup that he played. It was Jared Goff. Some of this is really surprising to me. Like ETN was really chalky today. Not insanely chalky, but he was really popular, had a massive game, and somehow he wasn't in this lineup. It was Goff double stacked with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams, ran it back with Puka Nacua. So obviously that's a very sensible game stack.
And
then you have the Bears defense that was correlated with DeAndre Swift. So you had the defense running back correlation. And then filling out the lineup, you had Travion Henderson, who also had a big game, obviously. And then you had in the lineup Colby Parkinson, so another run back. So it was actually a double stack with a double run back. And then just to save salary, it was Ben Sinnott, who I thought was a serviceable value. He didn't have the best game in the world. For his price point, it wasn't terrible. He had 1 catch for 36 yards. But with Zach Ertz out, I actually did like him a little bit more than our projections. Our projections ended up being right. I was wrong. But still, with that said, Sinnott ended up in the Millie-making winning lineup. So.
just because. Because.
I mean, it would just be he had the nuts just everywhere else in the lineup, other than having DeAndre Swift instead of ETN. So interesting that he got away with not having ETN in that winning lineup, but otherwise, yeah.
But look at, that's a classic build, right? Game stack of the highest scoring game. Now he did luck in with 2 touchdowns from Parkinson because he got those right after Adams got hurt, and then I think Puka got. I can't remember if the second one was before or after Puka got dinged up. The running back and defense against rookie quarterback who's played 4 games. that was a good move, and then he hit on the other one-offs that he had. So There you go. And he won by 5. So he almost could have taken a 0 from Sanat. Not quite. I don't have it up on the screen anymore.
No, he could have taken a 0 from Sanat and still won. He could have, because he won by 4.9 fantasy points, and Sanat scored 4.6.
Look at that. It's luxury play. That's just style points at that phase.
Yeah, somebody in chat saying it's crazy that Trevor Lawrence wasn't in it. That's not as crazy to me, just because the Lions stack and that game stack was so much better than the Jaguars game stack. So that part makes sense. The best scoring Trevor Lawrence lineup, I think, was him double stacked with Jacoby Myers and Brenton Strange. And just the pass catchers for the Jaguars didn't have big games. So
they didn't have the PPR. They just kept getting touchdowns.
You would have had to have played Trevor Lawrence naked, which wouldn't have really made a ton of sense. So like I could understand why Goff lineups ended up having better results than Lawrence lineups. That tracks to me.
All right. Is there anything weird that you're starting to see here in the data as we wind down, get our final runs uploaded here?
If we sort by some of the players who the Sims are getting us most over and underweight to the field to, as far as underweight, Aaron Jones. We do like Aaron Jones more than Jordan Mason in our projections, but ultimately our data is not really liking either of the Vikings running backs. If I had to roster one, it's going to be Aaron Jones for me over Jordan Mason. And something you had mentioned at the top when you were breaking down the running backs for the Vikings, Emac, is that Jordan Mason, typically more of the short yardage back. Aaron Jones, a little bit more of the pass catching back. There's also part of this too, where I think the Vikings would like to get Aaron Jones a larger share of the touches, but he just gets hurt all of the time. Yeah. And that's what limits it. If you look at the games that he actually plays to completion, he gets 60 to 70% of the snaps. It just almost never happens. You look at week 10. So he comes back from injury week 8. And he's on a little bit of a restriction first coming back. So he only plays about 50% of the snaps each of the first 2 games back. Then week 10, he plays 71% of snaps. Week 11, 67%. Week 12, 66%. Then week 13, he ends up getting dinged up a little bit in that game. And I believe he did in week 14 as well. So we saw his snap count dip a little bit. But in games where he does not go to the medical tent, which is a very big if, him and Woody Marks, they live there. They should take residence there. Get a timeshare, right? Where you could rent it out to other players when you're not occupying it all the time.
Anthony Davis doesn't like rostering him in DFS.
If you actually get Aaron Jones to play a game to completion, he's going to play 60 to 70% of snaps. It just has only happened 3 times the entire season that he's managed to do that. So if I'm going to play one of them, it's Aaron Jones. I just don't feel super comfortable with him when he's going to be in 50% of lineups with the amount of injuries that he ends up sustaining as chalk. The other players the Sims are getting us underweight to the field too. The Cowboys defense is very chalky today for a defense. 25% ownership, so we're getting a little bit underweight to them. And then Pickens as well, with our data preferring CeeDee Lamb over the 2. As far as players we are overweight to the field too, some of Jordan Mason, part of that's because he's only projected for 6% ownership. He's not really showing up in a ton of lineups. But then we do get overweight to the field to Jake Ferguson as well as JJ McCarthy. And I know it's not a comfortable click, but JJ McCarthy, I do think that at the quarterback position with a pretty reasonable price point, he does bring rushing upside to the table. And then also because people just hate JJ McCarthy because he's been terrible this year, which is a pretty reasonable reason to not love him as a fantasy asset. His ownership is low for a quarterback at a 9K price point. It's very rare on a showdown slate that a rushing quarterback, or not necessarily a rushing quarterback, but a quarterback with some rushing upside, I should say, is going to be 9K and sub 40% owned. So I do like JJ McCarthy for today as a relatively contrarian option on a 1-game slate.
Fair enough. Who is your most owned captain?
Yeah, so if we go over to the captains that we're getting to here in the Sims, you guys will see that 3 of them show up in at least 12% of lineups. It's CeeDee Lamb, Javonte Williams, and Dak Prescott. Of the 3, my personal preference is CeeDee Lamb for all the reasons that I laid out before. And then the captain we are most underweight to the field to, that's correlating with the flex ownership. It's George Pickens. The worst thing that could happen to me today is CeeDee Lamb getting hurt again or just playing poorly and Pickens just lapping him in fantasy points. That would likely be death to me.
I'm sorry, what was your percentages? Because I'm getting more Pickens than Lamb.
Oh,
Right.
okay. I have more of Lamb. I have about as you guys see here on the screen, then something similar with the other run that I did. I've got about twice as much of Lamb in the captain spot as Pickens.
Okay. Well, probably because I've capped him at 15 because
Okay.
I want to get a little more of a spread here on this. Let's see the flex. I wonder if they can add flex filter like they have captain filter on the improved Sims. I like how it just adjusts our favorite once you put in the information. You don't have to unfavorite, refavorite, all that extra step. This is pretty cool that it's live.
Yeah, I'll show you guys how this works now. So you no longer have to do the tedious ROI boost players and then go over to the Sims and unfavorite lineup and refavorite them. Here's what you can do instead now. Let's say you wanted more of JJ McCarthy because you're a totally sadistic person like me. You could just go 10% ROI boost to JJ McCarthy, press adjust favorites. So you'll see here, we have him in 46% of lineups in the flex, but after pressing adjust favorites, he went up to 49% of lineups. So then if you wanted to clear boost and then adjust favorites, you'll see JJ McCarthy is going to go back to the 46% that he was at before. So it's just a much faster way to update your lineups and manipulate some of your exposures.
Indeed, it is glorious. These are the from necessity comes inspiration, and we had plenty of inspiration. These were things that were all in the pipeline. We just had an impetus where we needed to get them all in right away.
And let's see if there's any questions for Discord. We've got one here from Sally Sal. Sal wants to know thoughts on fading JJ McCarthy in 20 max. I would not do that. McCarthy's one of my favorite plays on the slate. I think a lot of the field is not going to want to play. And I'm not going to pretend that JJ McCarthy comes without risk. He's been dog shit this year. He's been one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. He has one of the most fraudulent player of the week awards that I've ever seen. Keep that in mind. He's won the there are very few quarterbacks that have won as many player of the week awards as JJ McCarthy this year. But as far as McCarthy goes, for Sal's question here, fading McCarthy, I think that's what the majority of handbuilders in the field want to do, is they're going to start with the idea of, I will not play JJ McCarthy today. It is very rare, to what I said before, that you're going to get modest ownership on a quarterback that has the ability to run and is not overly expensive in Showdown. Yeah,
those are good call outs, because he is someone I actively wanted in my lineups as well. So hey, doing enough of these shows together, we're starting to know what the other is landing on here. So I'm not surprised you're going that path at all. Let me see why that didn't upload.
Rance saying in the chat, I get the sense that Emac's working on his lineups here, so I'll cover for y'all.
There's a little kerfluffle going on.
Yeah, I could tell. I know.
You know that puzzled look on my face?
Yeah. Rance says this game could be a shootout, unfortunately. So not only could this game be a shootout, but all right, here's the total for the game. The total
I'm all set, by the way, so I'm good.
Okay, cool. Rance, the total is 47.5, juiced towards the over. This is one of the highest totals in any game that we had for the entire weekend. This is a game that's expected to be pretty high scoring. Like, that's the expectation.
Yeah, I know he's on the road and probably not listening, but our Apple friend, Chris Williams, was asking, do we think the bracket coverage by Minnesota would be taking away either of the wide receivers? And I just think I'm not as worried about it, because you have two apex predators, a wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. And for as disappointing as Pickens was last game, he'd pretty much been minding his P's and Q's the rest of the season. So hopefully he got a little reset here on the 10-day break. But these are the key things you want to think about. Maybe I'll have egg on my face for that statement, but these guys are just so good. And especially with CeeDee Lamb, because CeeDee Lamb makes everybody else better around him, because the defense has to. He's like Amon-Ra St. Brown. You got to have two people on him, because he's good at every level of the route tree.
Want to check out some of the most duped lineups here, Emac?
Indeed. And shout out, Chris is here. Hey, Chris is a longtime reader of my article. I appreciate that.
Chris is here. All right. So our most duped lineup for today, it is CeeDee Lamb in the multiplier spot with Aaron Jones, Dak Prescott, Javonte Williams, TJ Hawkinson, and Will Reichert. If we're looking at the second most duped lineups, there's actually two lineups that are tied as the most duped here. CeeDee Lamb, Aaron Jones, Brandon Aubrey, Dak Prescott, JJ McCarthy, TJ Hawkinson. That is tied with George Pickens at the captain spot. Aaron Jones, Brandon Aubrey, Cowboys defense, Dak Prescott, Justin Jefferson. So one thing also that kind of stands out here, of the most duped lineups, Emac, most of them do not contain JJ McCarthy.
Interesting. Chris is clarifying. He's kind of thinking, does it lean towards one or the other? We've seen them both have good games together. If you have a lean on one of them, you can like where Greg's trying to bifurcate and go with more CeeDee Lamb. I think that makes sense. And then you're just hoping that somehow Pickens has taken more out of it. But I don't know who would be impacted more. That's the tough thing, right? Is it nonstop CeeDee, or is it, does Pickens get mad, and who knows? So
I do think a lot of times some of the matchups are kind of looked into too much and overrated. Every single game that CeeDee Lamb plays, he's a focal point of the defense's attention. And it doesn't stop him from pretty regularly having big games. Another thing, too, is you never know exactly how games are going to end up playing out, where, somebody plays the Patriots and be like, well, I think Gonzalez is going to cover this guy. And then he just doesn't end up covering that player, or they change something up in a certain way. And then you've made an entire decision on your lineups based on something that's completely random. It doesn't even end up happening. So I try to not really focus too much on the defensive matchups, because a lot of times they don't even put the guys. A lot of times the defensive back you think is going to cover a certain player, the scheme you think they're going to run, doesn't even end up being the case. And then also another thing to consider for something like Showdown, teams are facing the same defense, right? So what are you going to do? You're going to just say hey, I don't want to play Cowboys pass catchers because of how you think the Vikings are going to defend. And then it's, who are you playing if you're just taking the entire Cowboys passing game out of your player pool?
All valid points. Did you post any wagers for Tails tonight?
Not for NFL. I did some for NBA though, which I think those games.
There's only one game left.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think all of my bets have already locked. I could be wrong. I could have had a bet for. I'll check if I have. I'm looking on the Tails app right now on my phone.
That's it would be Portland and Golden State's the last game.
Yeah, let's see. Did I have one for? All right, I got logged out on my phone, so let me just check on the desktop.
While you're looking at that, the plays I would go to tonight, I like the Dak Prescott over 8.5 rushing yards, McCarthy over 18.5. And then I parlayed that so I could get my bonus booster on Hard Rock. I went with over 83.5 combined yards for Javonte Williams. This is a bit of a hedge because I don't have much Javonte Williams in my money in play here. So if these things come to fruition there, then I get a nice little insurance payout, $25 into $225 or something like that.
All right, very cool. So went through that, logged in, and no, all my bets have already started, Emac. So I don't have any pending bets after I was able to log in and look that up to deliver nothing to you guys. Just to let you guys know that I'm worthless for the next 30 seconds because the show is already just about over, Emac.
It is. We are about to be at lock. You know what's crazy is the amount of content that Josh Engelman is putting out. He has become a wizard with AI, the development helper, Claude, and he is pumping out all sorts of good stuff. We know he's awesome at basketball, but he's been putting out some NFL stuff as well. So follow him on Tails. All his stuff's going to be free there. And a lot of the things he was putting out on Twitter, he's now only putting on Tails. If you guys have a chance, please leave a rating and review in the Tails app. We are trying to get to 1,000 by Christmas here. That helps us out so much in the App Store and for product placement. And then that's going to allow us to do all sorts of other things because building that out, it's already one of the better tools out there. There are a lot that do similar things to Tails, but between that, where we want to go on our roadmap, and because we're keeping the garbage out of it and honesty in, this is going to be the place we want everybody to be. So please help us out there. It'll only take a couple minutes.
Yep. And if you guys haven't done it yet, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and enjoy the night. This was a fast show, Emac. This
Right.
I can't.
Do you want to hit the button? You got to read any numbers or anything?
No, not for this one. So that's it. We're done. End of the story. Later, guys.